The bulldozer blade hit my survey marker before I could even get out of my truck. Metal snapped. The orange flag vanished under mud. I slammed my door shut and shouted, "Stop!" The driver froze. But Miranda Vale did not. She stood beside the machine with a clipboard in her hand, smiling like she had just won something. "Keep going," she told the driver. "That marker is not valid." I walked straight toward her. "That is a recorded survey marker." She looked at me like I was a child arguing with a teacher. "No," she said. "That is an obstruction on HOA land." HOA land. My land. Behind her, two board members were recording me with their phones. A white pickup was parked across my rear access gate. 3 fresh warning signs had already been hammered into the ground. "Future HOA walking trail private resident access violators will be fined." My fence line was torn open. 2 stakes were already gone. The third was crushed under the bulldozer blade. I pointed at the mud. "You just destroyed legal boundary evidence." Miranda gave a small laugh. "You were warned, Mr. Collin. The board voted last night. This strip belongs to the neighborhood now." I stared at her. There are moments when anger makes people loud. Mine made me quiet. "Move the machine," I said. She stepped closer, still smiling. "If you interfere with HOA-approved work, we will fine you every day. And if you touch that equipment, I will call the sheriff and have you removed." The driver looked from her to me. He knew. I could see it on his face. He had been told this was common area. He had not been told there were recorded survey markers in the ground. I looked down at the torn mud. The bulldozer tracks crossed my rear property line, curved around my fence post, and stopped exactly where the marker had been. That was not an accident. That was targeted. I pulled out my phone and started recording. Miranda's smile tightened. "You do not have permission to film HOA contractors." "I'm filming damage on my property." "This is not your property." She said it so quickly, so cleanly, like repeating it enough times would make it true. Then the bulldozer blade shifted a few inches. Mud slid away from the edge, and I saw it. A round metal cap buried beside the crushed marker, stamped with numbers, still attached to concrete. Not a random stake, not an old pipe. A government survey monument. Miranda followed my eyes. For the first time that morning, her smile died. Because even she knew one thing. You can argue about grass. You can argue about fences. But you do not bulldoze a government survey monument and call it HOA business. I crouched before Miranda could step in front of it. The mud was thick around the cap, packed hard from the bulldozer blade. I used 2 fingers to wipe the top clean. The numbers showed first. Then the stamped letters around the edge. My stomach went cold. This was not one of my temporary markers. This was not something I had set last week. This was a permanent monument tied to the recorded subdivision boundary. The driver leaned down from the cab window. "Ma'am, should I shut it all the way down?" Miranda snapped her head toward him. "No. Stay where you are." I stood slowly and kept my phone pointed at the ground. "Do not move that blade again," I said. Miranda gave me the same flat smile, but now it looked forced. "You don't give instructions to contractors hired by the association." "I'm not talking to your contractor," I said. "I'm documenting a damaged monument." One of the board members behind her laughed under his breath. "Here we go," he said. "More scare tactics." I turned my camera toward him for 1 second. He lowered his phone a little. Miranda stepped closer and held out a folded paper. "This is your final notice." I did not take it at first. She pushed it toward my chest. I looked down. It was printed on HOA letterhead, big red letters across the top. Notice of unauthorized fence encroachment below. That was my name, my address, and a demand that I remove my rear fence within 10 days. Under the demand was a map. Not a survey, not a recorded plat. A neat little color map with a green strip drawn behind my property. The green strip was labeled Common Area Trail Corridor. I stared at the line. It ran across my back lot, then across my neighbor's lot, then behind 4 more houses. That was the first moment I understood this was not just about me. Miranda had not only claimed my land, she had claimed a strip behind half the street. "You see?" she said. "The map is clear." I looked up at her. A colored HOA map is not title. Her face hardened. "The board has authority over community land. Only land the association owns." She lowered her voice. "You are making this harder than it needs to be." "No," I said. "You made it hard when you put a bulldozer on a boundary monument." The driver climbed down from the machine now. He kept his hands open like he wanted no part of it. "I was told this was cleared," he said. Miranda turned on him. "It is cleared. He looked at the metal cap in the mud. It doesn't look cleared. That one sentence changed the air. Miranda knew it too. She grabbed the notice from my hand and tapped the map with her finger. This is the official HOA improvement plan. I looked at the strange green line again. It was too straight in places it should not be straight. It ignored fence corners. It ignored old pins. It ignored the curve of the recorded lots. And then I noticed something worse. The map did not match the legal description of the neighborhood at all. My name is Daniel Collin. Most people in that neighborhood only knew me as the quiet man behind the cedar fence. That was fine with me. I did not move there to make friends with an HOA. I moved there because the house sat just outside their boundary, on a narrow older parcel that existed before the subdivision wrapped around it. I had privacy. I had a rear gate. I had a small workshop, and I had enough space behind my fence to breathe. That strip of land was not fancy. It was not landscaped. It was not the kind of place anyone took pictures of. It was gravel, grass, fence posts, and a line of old markers most people would walk past without noticing. But to me it mattered. I am a licensed land surveyor. That is my one advantage in this story. Not money, not political connections, not a cousin in the sheriff's office. Just 21 years of reading deeds, plats, monuments, easements, and boundary descriptions while other people argued from emotion. I knew what a recorded line meant. I knew what an easement did not mean. And I knew the difference between a real survey and a pretty map printed for a neighborhood meeting. That difference was the reason Miranda Vale picked the wrong man to push. But at first, I did not know she was coming for my property. I knew the HOA was active. Everyone knew that. Their signs were always clean. Their newsletters were always dramatic. Their board emails used words like standards, safety, harmony, and community values. But I was not part of their association. My deed was separate. My tax bill was separate. My property had never been submitted to their covenants. So when HOA arguments happened, I stayed out of them. I heard about mailbox colors. I heard about trash cans left out too long. I heard about holiday lights. None of it touched me. Then the walking trail idea started. At first, it sounded harmless. A few neighbors mentioned it near the mailboxes. A path behind the rear lots. A little greenway for residents. A safe place for children to walk. People liked the sound of it. Nobody asked whose land it crossed. That was the part that bothered me. Because behind my fence, the land was mine. My rear line had been surveyed when I bought the house. The corners matched the deed. The fence was set inside my property, not on the edge, because I had learned long ago that fences create arguments when people treat them like legal lines. I kept copies of everything. The recorded plat, my closing survey, my deed, the old monument reference sheet. I did not expect to need them. Then one afternoon, I came home and found a white envelope taped to my gate. No stamp, no signature, just 3 words on the front. Final trail notice. The notice was not a legal letter. That was the first thing I noticed. It looked official because it had the HOA logo on top, a bold title, and a lot of strong language. But there was no deed reference, no book and page number, no recorded plat citation, no legal description, just a warning. The association was beginning common area improvement work behind my property. All fences, gates, markers, stored items, and obstructions had to be removed from the trail corridor. I read it twice at my kitchen table. Then I walked outside and looked through the rear gate. Nothing had changed. Same gravel, same grass, same old boundary markers, same land I paid taxes on every year. The next morning, Miranda Vale knocked on my front door. She did not look angry. That would have been easier to deal with. She looked prepared. She held a blue folder against her chest and gave me a practiced smile. "Mr. Collin, I'm sure there has been some confusion." I opened the door only halfway. "There has." "Good," she said, like I had agreed with her. "Then we can fix this before it becomes unpleasant." She opened the folder and showed me a color map. A green strip ran behind my property. "This area is part of the HOA's long-planned pedestrian trail. The board is finally moving forward." I looked at the map. "Where is the recorded instrument that gives the HOA ownership?" Her smile paused. "This is the association development map." "That is not what I asked." She blinked once. I kept my voice calm. "My property is not in your HOA." "That is a common misunderstanding," she said. "It is not a misunderstanding. It is in my deed." She tilted her head slightly, like she was disappointed in me. "Deeds can be complicated. The association has authority over shared areas that benefit the neighborhood, only if the association owns them." Her fingers tightened on the folder. "Mr. Collin, the trail has broad community support. Support does not transfer land. That was the first time I saw the real Miranda. The smile stayed, but the warmth left. You're taking a very hostile position for someone who lives beside a community. I'm taking the position written in my documents. She slid one paper from the folder and held it out. It was the same glossy map. No surveyor seal, no recording stamp, no legal description, just colors. I suggest you review this carefully, she said. The board will not let one difficult owner stop progress. I did not argue. I did not raise my voice. I took the paper, folded it once, and said, "Send me the recorded proof." She stepped back from the door. "You'll receive the board's decision soon." 3 days later, I did. It came in the mail with a fine attached. The fine was for $250. The reason was printed in bold, obstruction of common area access. Below it was a photo of my rear fence. My fence. On my property. The letter said I had 10 days to remove the fence section blocking the planned walking trail. If I refused, the HOA would add daily penalties and take corrective action at owner expense. I sat at my kitchen table with the letter in front of me and felt something heavy settle in my chest. Not fear. Not yet. More like disbelief turning into anger. They had no deed, no survey, no recorded transfer. But they had a letterhead, a board vote, and enough confidence to act like those things were the same as ownership. I called the HOA office. A woman answered with the tired voice of someone who had already been warned about me. "This is Daniel Collin," I said. "I received a fine from your association. I am not a member of your HOA." There was a pause. "Mr. Collin, the violation concerns common area obstruction." "Common area owned by whom?" Another pause. "The association." "Send me the recorded deed showing that." "I'll make a note." That was the whole call. No answer. No proof. Just a note. So I sent my own letter. Certified mail. 1 page. No insults. No threats. Just facts. I stated that my property was outside the HOA boundary. I listed my deed reference. I attached my closing survey. I asked them to remove the fine and stop entering my property. For 4 days, nothing happened. Then the second letter came. This one was not $250. It was $500. It said my response had been reviewed and rejected. Rejected. That word told me everything. They were not checking records. They were building pressure. The second letter warned that fines would continue until I removed the fence and allowed trail access. It also said the HOA could recover attorney fees, contractor costs, and enforcement expenses. That was when neighbors started looking at me differently. A man 2 houses down stopped waving. A woman walking her dog pulled it closer when she passed my driveway. At the mailbox, I heard my name once, then silence. Miranda had done what HOA presidents like her understand very well. She turned a boundary dispute into a community story. I was not a landowner defending my deed anymore. I was the man blocking a safe trail for children. I was the difficult neighbor, the selfish outsider. That part bothered me more than the money, because lies do not need to be legal to hurt you. They only need to be repeated in the right room by the right person. I paid nothing. I signed nothing. I removed nothing. But I did start saving every envelope, every email, every photo, every voicemail, because if Miranda wanted a paper trail, I was going to let her build one. Then, 1 week later, I found bright orange paint sprayed across my grass. The orange paint cut across my rear lot in one long crooked line. It started near the old drainage ditch, crossed my grass, passed 3 feet from my workshop, and ended at my rear gate. Someone had marked a trail path through my property like they were drawing on a parking lot. I stood there with my coffee still in my hand. For a few seconds, I did not move. Then I saw the man near the fence with a spray wand. He wore a safety vest and had a roll of flags hooked to his belt. "Who told you to mark this?" I asked. He turned around fast. "I'm with Ridgeway Site Prep." "That is not what I asked." He looked toward the street where a white HOA pickup sat idling. "I have a work order." "Show me." He hesitated. I did not step closer. I did not threaten him. I just waited. Finally, he pulled a folded paper from his vest and handed it to me. The work order said, "Preliminary trail layout authorized by Miranda Vale Area, HOA Common Corridor." I took a picture before he could ask for it back. Then I took another picture of the orange paint, the flags, the work order number, and the truck. "You cannot mark private land without permission," I said. The contractor rubbed the back of his neck. "Sir, I was told this was association property." "It is not." That was when Miranda arrived. She came through my rear gate like she owned the hinges. "You are interfering again," she said. I turned my phone camera toward her. She noticed immediately. Turn that off. No. Her mouth tightened. This is preliminary layout work approved by the board. Your board cannot approve work on land it does not own. She pointed at the painted line. That line follows the trail corridor. No, I said. That line follows your map. She smiled. Exactly. And there it was. The mistake she kept making. She believed the map because the map helped her. She never asked whether the map was recorded, sealed, surveyed, or tied to a legal description. To her, the paper in her folder was truth because it gave her power. I looked down at the paint near my workshop. Paint on grass is not a boundary. She laughed softly. You always do this. You hide behind technical language. It is not technical, I said. It is ownership. The contractor took one step back. He was listening now. Miranda saw that and raised her voice. The HOA attorney has reviewed this. What is the attorney's name? She looked away. Legal counsel is handling the matter. That is not a name. She turned to the contractor. Finish marking the route. He did not move. I held up the work order. You might want to call your office before you continue. For the first time, Miranda looked at the contractor like he had betrayed her. That evening, I washed none of the paint away. I photographed every foot of it, because that orange line proved the HOA had stopped threatening me. Now they were entering my land, and that night, someone cut the lock on my rear gate. The cut lock was lying in the dirt, not hidden, not tossed away, placed right in front of the gate like a message. I found it just after sunrise. The rear gate was open about 8 inches, swinging slightly in the wind. The chain hung loose. The grass behind it was pressed flat by tire tracks. I stood there for a moment, staring at the broken metal. That was the first time this stopped feeling like a dispute. It felt personal. Someone had come onto my land in the dark. Someone had cut through my gate. Someone had driven across my rear lot and left before morning. Nothing was stolen. That almost made it worse. They had not come for tools. They had come to show me they could enter whenever they wanted. I walked the tire tracks slowly. They crossed the orange-painted line, curved around my workshop, and stopped near the same boundary stakes Miranda wanted gone. One of my trail cameras was turned sideways, not broken, turned. Whoever did it knew where it was. I felt the anger rise in my throat, but I forced myself to breathe. Anger would help Miranda. Evidence would help me. I called the sheriff's office. A deputy came an hour later. He was polite but careful. He looked at the cut lock, the open gate, the tire marks, and the painted trail line. Any idea who did it? He asked. I know who benefits from it. That's not the same thing as proof. I know. He wrote that down. I could tell he had seen 100 property fights turn ugly. He did not want to step into one without clean evidence. This may be civil unless we can identify who entered, he said. I nodded, but inside I felt alone. That is the part people do not understand about these fights. It is not just land. It is sleep. It is walking outside and wondering who has been there. It is checking your gate twice before bed. It is hearing a truck slow down near your driveway and feeling your body tense. After the deputy left, I pulled the memory card from the trail camera. Most of the night was empty. Wind, bugs, a cat crossing the grass. Then, at 1:13 a.m., said lights washed across the frame. A white pickup rolled through the open gate. The plate was not fully visible, but the side door was. A logo flashed for less than a second when the headlights bounced off the fence. The HOA logo. My hands went still. The camera had been turned after the truck entered, not before. That meant it had recorded just enough. Not a face, not a confession, but enough to prove the break-in was connected to the association. I copied the file 3 times. One on my computer, one on a drive, one in cloud storage. Then I printed the police report number and placed it in a folder with the fines, the work order, the painted line photos, and Miranda's notices. That folder was getting thicker, and the thicker it got, the less I felt like a man being cornered. The next morning, I stopped reacting. I went to the county records office and pulled every recorded document on that neighborhood. County records do not care who is popular. They do not care who wins HOA votes. They do not care who sends the loudest emails. They only show what was recorded. That morning, I sat at a public computer in the county records office and started with my deed. Then I pulled the original subdivision plat for the HOA neighborhood, then the later amendments, then the easement documents, then the old developer filings. Page by page, the story changed. Not emotionally, legally. My deed showed the rear strip inside my property. My closing survey matched it. The original plat matched it. The permanent monument reference matched it. The HOA map Miranda kept waving around matched none of them. I leaned back in the chair and stared at the screen. There it was. The green trail corridor did exist, but not in the legal records. It appeared in an old developer marketing plan, a sales drawing, a pretty picture made before the neighborhood was fully built. That drawing showed trees, trails, ponds, benches, and smiling families. It was meant to sell lots. It was not meant to transfer ownership. But somewhere over the years, the HOA had treated that drawing like a deed. That was bad enough. Then I found the drainage easement. It ran behind several lots, including near mine. But the language was clear. It existed for stormwater drainage and maintenance access. It did not give the HOA public walking rights. It did not make the land common area. It did not move private boundaries. An easement is a limited right. Ownership is something else. That is a small sentence, but it changes everything. If someone has an easement across your land, they may have the right to use it for a specific purpose. Drainage, utilities, maintenance, access, whatever the document says. But they do not own the land unless the deed says they own it. And this deed did not say that. I printed certified copies. My hands were steady now. For the first time since the lock had been cut, I felt the pressure shift. Miranda had been relying on confusion. She used words people did not question. Common area, improvement zone, trail corridor, community access. Those words sounded official. They made neighbors nod. They made contractors show up. They made board members feel safe holding phones in my face. But the documents underneath were weak. Worse than weak. Wrong. I spread the printed pages across the table and traced the rear line with my finger. The HOA's green trail did not just cross my land. It crossed several private rear lots. It cut through places where fences had been built for years. It passed through yards people believed were protected. That meant Miranda's mistake was bigger than my fence. If she pushed forward, she would not just damage my property. She would force the state and county to look at the entire rear boundary system. Then I noticed a handwritten note on the old plat margin. Small, almost faded, but still readable. Rear boundary tied to state monument reference. I stared at that handwritten note longer than I stared at anything else that morning. Rear boundary tied to state monument reference. 7 words. Quiet words, but they changed the weight of the whole dispute. That note meant the monument behind my fence was not just a marker for my corner. It was part of the control system used to establish the rear boundary of the subdivision. In plain language, it helped tell the neighborhood where it actually was. If that monument had been disturbed, damaged, or moved by machinery, then the problem was no longer just between me and an HOA president with a clipboard. It was now tied to recorded boundary control. And recorded boundary control is not something a board vote can erase. I made copies of the plat. I highlighted nothing. I wrote nothing in the margins. I did not want anyone later saying I had changed or marked the evidence. Then I walked outside to my truck, sat behind the wheel, and called the state survey board. The first woman who answered transferred me twice. The third person listened. He did not sound impressed at first. He sounded like a man who received too many angry property calls from people who did not understand fences. So I stayed calm. I gave him the monument number. I gave him the county. I gave him the subdivision plat reference. Then I told him a bulldozer blade had struck the monument during HOA trail work. The line went quiet. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. Was the monument disturbed by machinery? Yes. Do not move it. I haven't. Do not try to reset it. I won't. Photograph everything. Preserve the site. Send us the plat note and your images. That was it. No long speech. No dramatic promise. Just instructions. But those instructions told me what I needed to know. The state cared. I sent the photos that afternoon. The broken stakes. The blade marks. The cap in the mud. The HOA notice. The map with the green trail corridor. The work order signed by Miranda Vale. Then I waited. Waiting was harder than I expected, because Miranda was not waiting. By 5 o'clock, there was another email from the HOA. Final compliance demand. 48 hours. Remove the rear fence. Withdraw my objections. Allow trail crews full access. If I refused, the HOA would seek emergency enforcement and charge all costs to me. At the bottom was Miranda's name. President, Vale Ridge Homeowners Association. I read it twice. Then I saved it in the folder. I did not answer. The next morning, the HOA newsletter went out to the entire neighborhood. The subject line was, Special Meeting to Resolve the Callan Property Obstruction. I sat at my desk looking at that word. Obstruction. Not dispute. Not boundary question. Obstruction. Miranda was taking me public, and she still had no idea the state had already opened the door. I went to the HOA meeting because Miranda wanted me afraid of the room. She wanted 50 neighbors staring at me. She wanted whispers. She wanted the pressure of folded arms, angry faces, and people who had already been told I was stealing something from their children. So I walked in 5 minutes early. I signed the visitor sheet. Then I sat in the back row with a folder on my lap and said nothing. Miranda stood at the front beside a projector screen. The same green trail map was already displayed behind her. A red circle had been drawn around my property, not the disputed area, my house. That was not an accident. She wanted everyone to know exactly where to point their anger. The room was full. Couples from the rear lots, older residents, parents with kids leaning against their knees, 2 board members at the table, the HOA manager with a laptop open. Miranda tapped the microphone. We are here tonight because one non-cooperative owner has delayed a project approved by this community. Heads turned toward me. I kept my eyes on the screen. She spoke for almost 10 minutes. Safety, walkability, neighborhood values, children needing a protected path, property standards. She used all the right words, the kind of words that make people feel good while they are being led past the facts. Then she clicked to the next slide. A photo of my fence filled the screen. A few people muttered. Miranda lowered her voice. This fence blocks common area access. I raised my hand. She pretended not to see it. A man in the front row turned and said, "Let him ask." The room got quiet. Miranda smiled tightly. Briefly, I stood. I have one question. Does the HOA have a recorded deed showing it owns the strip behind my property? She lifted the glossy map. The board has reviewed the official trail corridor. That is not a deed. A few people shifted in their chairs. I continued. Does the HOA have a recorded plat, deed, or legal description transferring that land to the association? Miranda's face hardened. Our attorney has reviewed this matter. What is the document number? She looked at the HOA manager. The manager looked at the laptop. No one answered. Miranda turned back to the crowd. This is exactly the kind of obstruction we've been dealing with. I nodded once. Please enter my question into the meeting minutes. Her eyes narrowed. What? Please enter that I asked for the recorded document proving HOA ownership and that none was provided tonight. The room went quiet again. She should have refused. Instead, pride made the decision for her. Fine, she said. Put it in the minutes. The manager typed. That sound was small. Just keys clicking, but to me, it sounded like a lock turning. Miranda had now placed her claim on official HOA record in front of witnesses while relying on a map that had no legal force. After the meeting, I walked to my truck alone. Then someone called my name. An older man stood near the sidewalk, holding a yellow folder against his chest. His voice was low. Mr. Callan, I think you need to see what the developer gave us when we bought our house. The older man's name was Glenn Mercer. I had seen him before, usually walking slowly near the mailboxes with a black cane in one hand and a newspaper tucked under his arm. He lived 3 lots down from the rear bend of the subdivision. He looked over his shoulder before handing me the folder. I didn't want to speak in there, he said. Miranda doesn't like being corrected. I opened the folder under the parking lot light. Inside were old papers from when he bought his house. Closing documents, a sales brochure, a developer letter, and a folded color plan of the neighborhood from almost 20 years earlier. The same green trail was there, but the wording was different. Not common area, not HOA and land, not recorded access. It said, proposed future greenway concept. That word mattered. I looked at Glenn. Did anyone tell you this was legally recorded? He gave a tired laugh. They told us it would be a beautiful trail someday, that was all. Most of us assumed the developer had handled the land. Did anyone show you a deed? No. I turned another page. The developer letter was careful, very careful. It talked about planned amenities, possible community improvements, and future access subject to approvals. Subject to approvals. That meant nothing had been completed. Nothing had been transferred. Nothing had been guaranteed. Glenn tapped the brochure with one finger. When Miranda became president, she started saying this greenway had always belonged to the HOA. A few of us questioned it, but she said the old records proved it. They don't, I said. I know that now. His voice dropped. She pressured people hard, said if the trail failed, property values would drop, said anyone opposing it was hurting the neighborhood. That sounded like Miranda. Not cartoon evil, not stupid. Just certain that if she controlled the story, the facts would catch up somehow. Glenn looked embarrassed. I believed her at first. A lot of people did. He nodded toward my folder. You can copy all of it. I did not smile. I did not celebrate. But I felt something shift. For weeks, Miranda had made me look like the outsider blocking the neighborhood. Now I had proof the neighborhood itself had been sold a picture, not a property right. The next morning, Glenn scanned everything and emailed it to me. The brochure, the letter, the proposed Greenway plan, his original closing packet. I printed each page and placed it behind the county records. The evidence was no longer one line. It was a chain. My deed, the recorded plat, the monument reference, the drainage easement, the HOA violation letters, the work order, the trail camera video, the meeting minutes, and now the developer's own brochure calling the trail a concept. A sales brochure can make a buyer excited. It can sell a dream. But it cannot transfer land. That has to be done through recorded documents. Miranda had built her entire case on the wrong kind of paper. Then, 2 days later, the HOA attorney finally sent me a letter. And somehow, he made her problem even worse. The attorney letter came by certified mail. It was 6 pages long. Heavy paper, firm language, expensive letterhead. The kind of letter meant to make an ordinary person feel small before they even finished the first paragraph. I sat at my kitchen table and read every word. The HOA's attorney demanded that I remove my rear fence within 7 days. He accused me of interfering with association property. He said the HOA would seek an injunction if I continued blocking approved trail construction. Then he cited the HOA covenants. That was the first problem. I was not in the HOA. My deed was older than their subdivision. My parcel had never been added to their covenants. Their rules did not run with my land. They could write my name in as many letters as they wanted, but that did not make me a member. I kept reading. The second problem was worse. The letter described the trail corridor using the same green map boundary Miranda had shown at the meeting. Not the recorded plat, not a title report, not a legal survey, the map. I leaned back in my chair and let out a slow breath. This was not just Miranda talking anymore. This was the association's lawyer putting the wrong claim in writing. I did not answer with anger. I answered with documents. My response was short. I stated that I was not a member of the HOA. I attached my deed. I attached the recorded plat. I attached my closing survey. I attached the drainage easement language. I attached the developer brochure calling the trail a proposed concept. Then I asked one simple question. Please provide the recorded instrument that transfers ownership of the disputed strip to the association. I sent it by certified mail. I sent a copy by email. Then I waited. The attorney did not answer the question. Miranda did. At 8:14 that night, she sent a message from her HOA account to the board, the manager, the contractor, and me by mistake. Maybe she meant to leave me off. Maybe she wanted me to see it. Either way, she wrote, "Legal has confirmed we are fully authorized. Do not let Colin delay the project with survey technicalities." Survey technicalities. I stared at those 2 words. A deed was not a technicality. A monument was not a technicality. Ownership was not a technicality. But Miranda had said exactly what I needed her to say. She was not asking questions anymore. She was telling people to ignore the only documents that mattered. I saved the email. Printed it. Backed it up twice. The next morning, I received a call from the state survey office. The inspector's voice was brief. "We reviewed the materials you sent. Do not disturb the site. I'll be there Thursday morning." I looked out the window toward the rear fence. The orange paint was still visible in the grass. The broken lock was still on my workbench. The bulldozer tracks had dried into hard ridges. For the first time in weeks, I felt calm. Not because it was over. Because someone with authority was finally coming to see the ground for himself. The state inspector arrived before 8. No flashing lights. No dramatic entrance. Just a gray truck, a hard case of equipment, and a man in a faded field jacket who looked like he had spent half his life standing in ditches reading metal caps. His name was Martin Reyes. He shook my hand once and went straight to the rear lot. I did not give him a speech. I showed him the bulldozer tracks first, then the crushed stake, then the orange paint, then the blade mark in the mud where the monument cap was still partly exposed. He crouched down. For almost a minute, he said nothing. He brushed dirt from the cap with a small tool, checked the stamp number, then looked back at the plat copy in his hand. His face did not change much, but his voice did. "This should have stopped work immediately." I nodded. The driver asked if he should stop. "Who told him to continue?" I opened my phone and played the video. Miranda's voice came through clearly. "Keep going. That marker is not valid." The inspector watched it twice. Then he looked at me. "Send me that file. I already made copies." "Good." A white pickup pulled up near my rear gate 10 minutes later. One of the HOA board members stepped out first, phone already in hand. Then Miranda arrived in her black SUV. She walked fast, but not as confidently as usual. "Mr. Collins," she said sharply, "you are not authorized to bring outside parties into an HOA work zone." The inspector stood up. Miranda looked at him for the first time. "And you are?" "Martin Reyes, State Survey Compliance." That changed her posture, only a little. But I saw it. She turned her smile on him. "Well, this is a misunderstanding. The association has an approved improvement plan." Reyes looked at the damaged cap. "Who authorized equipment over this monument?" Miranda folded her arms. "The board authorized trail preparation. The marker was placed by Mr. Collin to interfere with the project." I stayed quiet. Reyes held up the plat. "This monument predates your project." Miranda's smile thinned. "Our attorney has reviewed the corridor. Your attorney does not determine monument validity in the field." The board member stopped recording. Miranda tried again. "This is HOA common area." Reyes looked at her directly. "Ma'am, your board vote does not outrank a recorded survey monument." No one spoke. Not Miranda. Not the board member. Not the driver who had now parked across the street and was watching from his truck. The inspector took more photos. He measured from the cap to nearby control points. He checked the fence line, the drainage easement, and the orange paint across my grass. Then he walked the rear edge of 3 neighboring lots. When he came back, his expression was serious. "This may not be limited to your property," he said. Miranda's head snapped toward him. "What does that mean?" Reyes closed his field book. "It means the boundary map your association is using may need formal review." For the first time, Miranda did not answer right away. She looked past the inspector toward the rear yards like she was seeing them differently now. The painted trail line ran behind the houses in a clean green promise on her map. But on the ground, it crossed fences, garden beds, sheds, old trees, and private rear gates. It ignored how people actually owned the land. Reyes walked to the next lot with his equipment. I followed at a distance. Miranda followed too. So did 2 board members. By noon, half the street knew something was happening. People came onto porches. Curtains moved. A man in a bathrobe stood with a coffee mug and watched the state inspector place flags behind his fence. Every few minutes, Reyes stopped, checked a reference point, looked at the recorded plat, and shook his head just enough for people to notice. He did not make speeches. That made it worse for Miranda. Quiet officials scare people more than angry ones. At the 3rd rear lot, Reyes called over the county survey liaison who had arrived in a separate truck. They spoke in low voices. Then they measured again. Miranda finally stepped in. "Can someone explain why you are entering other properties?" Reyes looked up. "We are checking the control line your association used for the trail. The HOA map is already approved." "By whom?" "The board." Reyes stared at her. Then he looked back down at his notes. That was answer enough. By the 2nd day, 2 more survey crew members arrived. By the 3rd day, small white flags marked the rear boundary across several lots. And by the 4th day, the truth was clear. The HOA's map was wrong. Not slightly wrong. Not needs adjustment wrong. Wrong in a way that changed who controlled land behind nearly half the neighborhood. The so-called trail corridor crossed private property again and again. A drainage easement had been shaded green on the HOA plan and treated like common area. Old developer concept drawings had been copied into board packets until everyone forgot they were only concepts. Miranda tried to blame the original developer, then the management company, then the attorney, then me. But the inspector's report did not care about blame. It cared about facts. The recorded plat did not show HOA ownership of the strip. The deeds did not transfer it. The easement did not create public access. And the monument Miranda ordered her contractor to ignore was part of the very system proving that. Residents started asking questions. Does this affect my fence? Is my shed on my lot? Did we pay dues for land we don't own? Who approved the trail budget? Miranda's face got tighter with every question. The power in the room, in the street, in the neighborhood was shifting. For weeks, I had been the problem. Now the map was the problem, and Miranda had built her entire presidency on that map. The next morning, county workers arrived with a printed notice. They walked straight to the torn-up trail area and posted it on a wooden stake. Stop work order. The stop work order was posted at 9:06 in the morning. I know the time because I took a photo of it. A county enforcement officer hammered the notice into a wooden stake beside the torn trail path. Sheriff's deputy stood a few feet behind him, not touching anything, just watching. That alone changed the neighborhood. People who had ignored my fence for weeks suddenly came outside. Garage doors opened. Phones came out. Someone whispered, "Is that the sheriff?" Miranda arrived 7 minutes later. She parked crooked against the curb, stepped out fast, and walked straight to the county officer.
What is this?
The officer did not flinch. "Stop work order. This is private HOA improvement work." "Not anymore." Her face flushed. "We have approval. Your permits relied on incorrect boundary information." Miranda pointed toward me. "He is disputing everything to delay the project." The officer looked at his clipboard. "This order is not based on Mr. Collins' opinion." That landed hard. I stood beside my rear gate and said nothing. I had learned by then that silence can be stronger than arguing, especially when the facts are finally speaking. The contractor from Ridgeway Site Prep arrived next. He read the stop work order, looked at the sheriff's deputy, then looked at Miranda. "We're pulling our equipment." Miranda snapped, "You are under contract." He shook his head. "Not for boundary violations. Not for damaged monuments. Not for disputed land." His crew loaded cones, signs, and tools into the truck. The bulldozer stayed where it was, locked out until the county cleared removal. Residents gathered in small groups near driveways. The same people who had stared at me like I was selfish now stared at Miranda like she had brought trouble to their doors. She felt it. I could see it in the way she kept checking faces. Then she turned toward me. "You must be very proud of yourself." I looked at the torn grass, the cut gate, the crushed marker, the orange paint, and the sign that claimed my land for a trail. "No," I said. "I'm tired." For once, she had no quick answer. The county officer walked to the posted notice and read the main violations aloud for the record. Unauthorized land disturbance, work beyond permitted boundary, failure to verify ownership, damage to protected survey monument pending state review. The last line changed the sound of the crowd. People understood fines. They understood bad permits. But a protected survey monument sounded official in a way Miranda could not soften with HOA language. She tried anyway. The association acted in good faith. The officer looked at her. "You cannot build access across land you do not own." That was the clearest sentence anyone had said since this began. The sheriff's deputy stepped closer, not aggressive, just present. "Equipment stays until removal is approved. No one enters Mr. Collins' property without permission." Miranda looked at the deputy, then at the neighbors. Her control was slipping in public. But she was not done. By that evening, the board received an email from her blaming the contractor for everything, and someone forwarded it to me. The forwarded email arrived at 8:42 that night. No message above it, no explanation, just Miranda's words sent to the board, the HOA manager, and the attorney. Subject line: "Contractor failure trail delay." I read it once. Then I read it again. Miranda blamed Ridgeway Site Prep for entering the wrong area. She said the contractor had misunderstood the approved corridor. She said the board had relied on professional execution and should not be held responsible for field mistakes. Field mistakes. That was what she called it. Not the fine letters. Not the work order with her name on it. Not the meeting where she claimed the land on record. Not the email telling everyone to ignore my survey technicalities. Just field mistakes. But the forwarded chain included more than her latest message. Whoever sent it had included earlier emails, too. And those emails changed everything. 3 weeks before the bulldozer arrived, the HOA manager had written, "Miranda, we still do not have recorded ownership documents for the rear strip." A board member replied, "Can we proceed if this is only an easement?" Then the attorney wrote, "Recommend title verification before any physical work begins." I sat very still. There it was, in writing. They had been warned. Then Miranda replied, "The project cannot be delayed again. Colin is using survey language to scare residents. Proceed with layout." I leaned back in my chair and felt no joy. People think revenge feels like a victory when proof finally appears. It does not. It feels heavy. Because now you know the damage was avoidable. The cut lock, the paint, the public meeting, the bulldozer, the monument. All of it could have stopped with one honest title check. But Miranda had wanted momentum more than truth. The email chain kept going. The contractor had asked, "Please confirm all markers in the work area are non-official and can be removed." Miranda answered, "Yes, they are owner-placed obstructions." That one line made my jaw tighten. She did not know that. She had no right to say it. And by then, she had already been warned the records were unclear. The next morning, the same email chain spread through the neighborhood. By lunch, people were talking in driveways. By evening, 3 residents had emailed the board demanding an emergency meeting. This time, the subject line was not about me. It was about Miranda. The HOA manager sent the meeting notice 2 days later. Emergency board session boundary review and president authority. I almost did not go. Part of me was exhausted. Part of me wanted to let them fight among themselves. But Glenn called and said, "You should be there. They blamed you in public. The correction should happen in public too." So I went. The room looked different this time. Same chairs, same projector, same board table, but no one was smiling at Miranda. She sat at the front with her arms folded, staring straight ahead. For the first time since this began, she was walking into a room she could not control. The emergency meeting started with silence, not the polite kind, the angry kind. Miranda sat at the center of the board table with a stack of papers in front of her. Her jacket was perfect. Her posture was straight. But her hands kept touching the same page over and over. The room was packed. This time, people were not looking at me. They were looking at her. The HOA attorney sat near the end of the table, avoiding eye contact with almost everyone. The county enforcement officer stood near the wall. Martin Reyes, the state survey inspector, was there too, holding a folder under one arm. That told the room this was not neighborhood gossip anymore. This was official. The HOA manager cleared her throat. "This emergency session concerns the trail project, boundary review, and authority granted for physical work." Miranda reached for the microphone. "I want to begin by saying every action I took was for the benefit of this community." A woman in the second row spoke before Miranda could continue. "Did you know we didn't own the trail land?" Miranda blinked. "The ownership issue is being clarified." A man near the back said, "That wasn't the question." The room stirred. Miranda's voice sharpened. The project was approved based on documents available to the board. Glenn stood slowly with his cane. "You mean the sales brochure?" People turned toward him. He held up the old developer packet. "This says proposed concept, not common area." Miranda's face hardened. "That document is outdated." The attorney finally leaned toward his microphone. "Outdated does not mean legally irrelevant." That was the first crack from her own side. The room went still. Then the HOA manager read from the email chain. Her voice shook a little. "We still do not have recorded ownership documents for the rear strip." She paused. "Then read the attorney's warning. Recommend title verification before any physical work begins." Miranda stared down at the table. I could see the moment residents understood. This was not a simple mistake. She had been warned. The manager read Miranda's reply. "The project cannot be delayed again. Colin is using survey language to scare residents. Proceed with layout." No one defended her after that. A board member pushed his chair back. "I was told legal had cleared the boundary." "So were we," another resident said. Miranda lifted her head. "You all wanted this trail. Do not pretend I acted alone." That was the wrong thing to say. The room turned cold. I was asked if I wanted to speak. I stood with my folder in my hand. I did not look at Miranda first. I looked at the neighbors who had believed her. "I asked one question from the beginning," I said. "Show me the recorded document proving ownership." No one did. I opened the folder. "My deed shows the strip is mine. The recorded plat matches it. The drainage easement does not create walking access. The developer brochure calls the trail a proposed concept. The work order used the HOA map, not a legal survey. And the state inspector confirmed the monument was real." I stopped there. No insults. No speech. Just facts. Martin Reyes stepped forward. "The association cannot vote itself into ownership." That line ended the meeting before the vote even started. 20 minutes later, Miranda Vale was removed as HOA president. Miranda's removal did not fix the ground. That was the part nobody wanted to hear. People wanted the vote to end the problem. They wanted one bad leader removed, one apology made, and everything to go back to normal. But property damage does not disappear because a room finally tells the truth. The bills came next. First came the county penalties. The HOA was fined for unauthorized land disturbance and work outside the permitted boundary. The stop work order stayed in place until every piece of equipment was removed under supervision. Then came the state report. The damaged monument had not been destroyed completely, but it had been struck, exposed, and disturbed enough to require formal review. The HOA had to pay for inspection costs, monument protection, and corrected survey reference filings. That number was not small. Then Ridgeway Site Prep's insurance company contacted me. Their tone was different from Miranda's. Careful, professional, worried. They had seen the work order. They had seen the video. They had seen Miranda's email confirming the markers were owner-placed obstructions. They did not argue that my land was HOA land. They asked for repair estimates. My fence needed work. My gate needed replacement. The torn-up grass and gravel behind my workshop had to be restored. My survey costs had to be covered. My legal consultation had to be reimbursed. I did not ask for a lottery ticket. I asked for what it cost to put things back. The settlement came quietly. Most of these things do. No dramatic courtroom scene, no judge slamming a gavel. Just paperwork, insurance calls, checks, signatures, and people trying to stop the bleeding before it got worse. The HOA's trail grant was frozen, then canceled. The walking trail signs came down one by one. The green corridor disappeared from the HOA website. The board hired a real survey firm, not to support Miranda's map, but to correct it. Several homeowners learned their rear lot lines were different from what the HOA had told them for years. Some fences were fine. Some sheds needed agreements. Some landscaping sat inside easements, but not outside ownership. It was messy, expensive, and embarrassing. But it was finally honest. Miranda resigned from the board entirely 2 weeks after her removal. She sent one short statement saying she had acted in the community's best interest. No apology. Not to me. Not to the residents. Not to the contractor she tried to blame. That did not surprise me. People like Miranda often mistake losing control for being treated unfairly. A few neighbors came by after that. Not many. Enough. Glenn shook my hand by the mailbox and said, "I should have spoken sooner." A woman who had once pulled her dog away from me left a note on my porch. It said, "I'm sorry we believed the wrong person." I kept that note, not because I needed victory, because it reminded me that a neighborhood can be misled, but it can also wake up. By the end of the month, my rear gate was repaired, the fence was straight again, and the corrected boundary record was filed. The land was quiet. But I still had one more place to stand before I could let the whole thing go. 3 months later, I stood behind my fence where the bulldozer had first crossed the line. The grass had grown back in patches, not perfect, but alive. The orange paint was gone. The trail signs were gone. The tire ruts had been filled. My rear gate opened and closed cleanly again, with a new lock and a stronger chain. And in the ground, protected by a small steel cover, was the monument Miranda had tried to erase. I stood over it for a long time. No crowd, no cameras, no board members holding phones, just me, the fence, and the quiet strip of land that had somehow become the center of an entire neighborhood collapse. The corrected boundary record had been filed with the county. The state reference notes were updated. The HOA's map was replaced, not edited, replaced. That mattered, because sometimes the real victory is not making someone look foolish. It is removing the lie they used to hurt people. For months, Miranda had acted like power could create truth. She said common area until people believed it. She said approved corridor until contractors entered land they did not own. She said survey technicalities until neighbors treated my deed like an excuse. And for a while, it worked. That was the dangerous part. Most people are busy. They do not have time to read plats and easements. They trust the person standing at the front of the room with a microphone and a confident voice. Miranda understood that. She did not need everyone to know the truth. She only needed them to stop asking for it. But land does not move because a board votes. A deed does not disappear because a president gets annoyed. A survey monument does not become invalid because it stands in the way of a walking trail. I knelt and brushed a little dirt away from the steel cover. The cap underneath was still there. Stamped. Recorded. Real. A few houses down, Glenn raised one hand from his driveway. I raised mine back. The neighborhood was different after that. Quieter, more careful. Board meetings got smaller. Notices got less dramatic. The new HOA president began every property discussion with one question. Do we have the recorded document? That question would have saved everyone a lot of money. It would have saved my fence. It would have saved the contractor from being dragged into a fight. It would have saved Miranda from herself. But some lessons only arrive after damage. I do not brag about what happened. I do not tell people I beat the HOA. That makes it sound like a game, and it never felt like one. It felt like being pushed, watched, blamed, and tested until the ground itself had to answer. And it did. The line was where it had always been. Under the grass, under the mud, under every false map and every loud meeting. Still there, because a boundary line is not just dirt. It is proof that power has limits.